Midnight News coming to you live from Algiers with me, Marim Zian, to the headlines. New Zionist massacres target civilians in different areas of the Gaza Strip. The resistance launches a surprise attack on an occupation camp in Khan Yunis, leaving several Zionists dead and wounded. Fears rise over the consequences of the occupation's call-up of thousands of reserve soldiers. Coming up next, under tight security measures, a high-level Sahrawi delegation is taking part in the 9th Tokyo International Conference on African Development, dealing a blow to Morocco's diplomacy. Next, deaths reported after a rapid support forces attack in North Kordofan. Hamditi's forces targeted communal kitchens providing food to civilians in Al Fashir. Darfur authorities confirmed the spread of famine in refugee camps under RSF control. And Russia reiterates its rejection of any security guarantees for Ukraine without its participation, accusing the European Union of working to undermine diplomacy. NATO chiefs of staff discuss future steps following the Washington talks on the war in Ukraine. Hello and welcome back to the details of your nightly news. First, on August 20, 1955 and 1956, a spirit was born, the spirit of the Algerian people taking their destiny into their own hands, a momentum that went on to inspire other nations to break free from the yoke of colonialism. Marwa Belaiwar has the report.
On August 20, 1956, the Somam Congress marked a decisive turning point in Algeria's revolution and in anti-colonial struggles across the global south. Held in the midst of the Cold War and a wave of decolonization, the Congress laid out a new political and military blueprint that would inspire movements far beyond Algeria's borders. Faced with colonial oppression and complex geopolitical stakes, the Somam Congress reinforced the unity of the National Liberation Front and established 6 provinces, territorial zones that ensured coordination of the armed struggle and internal democratic control. This structure was not only a response to the Algerian War of Liberation, but also a strategic vision for the country's place in a changing world. Across Africa, nations were rising up for independence while the Cold War reshaped global power. Algeria positioned itself as a leader, offering a model of unified resistance aligned with the ideals of the non-aligned movement. The Somam Congress became a symbol for the global south, showing that decolonization requires not only armed resistance, but also political clarity, long-term vision, and commitment to sovereignty. Today, that legacy continues to inspire liberation movements and emerging nations, a reminder of the determination of peoples to build a free, just, and sovereign world beyond imperialist influence.
And in occupied Palestine, as you followed in our top stories, dozens of Palestinians were martyred and others wounded in Zionist shelling since dawn on Wednesday across several areas of the Gaza Strip. According to the Palestinian news agency, at least 94 Palestinians were killed and dozens more injured with varying degrees of severity after Zionist airstrikes targeted civilians in multiple locations since dawn today.
At around 2:30 a.m., we heard the sound of a shock and a big explosion. We went running with everyone here in the neighborhood. We found the house of Firas al-Masri and Sheikh Ali al-Masri in rubble, and 2 rockets hit it. Everyone left the house. They have a child and a girl as martyrs and a woman in a critical condition.
We were surprised by an Israeli airstrike that targeted around 3 floors, surely without any fault of the inhabitants. Most of the victims were children. A child who is maybe 10 years old was martyred, and there was also a 1-year-old girl.
The Director General of the Palestinian Health Ministry in Gaza, Munir al-Bur, said Wednesday that the Zionist occupation is killing 1 child every 40 minutes in the Strip. He added that more than 1 million children in Gaza are suffering psychological trauma, with 50% experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder. He also revealed that hospital bed occupancy has reached 300%, an unprecedented figure that reflects the magnitude of the humanitarian and health catastrophe in Gaza. And on the ground, the Al-Qassam Brigade's the military wing of Hamas announced that it launched an hours-long attack on a Zionist occupation site in Khan Yunis, southern Gaza. In a statement Wednesday, Al-Qassam confirmed that its fighters killed several occupation soldiers at point-blank range, fatally sniped the commander of a Merkava tank, and reported casualties among a rescue unit after one of its fighters carried out a martyrdom operation. Al-Qassam also targeted Merkava tanks in houses where soldiers were fortified with anti-fortification and anti-personnel shells, while striking surrounding sites with mortar fire to cut reinforcements and secure its fighters' withdrawal. And many Palestinians in Khan Yunis, southern Gaza, expressed outrage at the Zionist entity's call-up of tens of thousands of reserve soldiers ahead of a new offensive. They described the news as catastrophic and voiced hope for positive developments regarding a truce and ceasefire. They stressed that the incoming reserve forces are committed to occupation and the total destruction of Gaza.
The Gaza Strip can't take it anymore. We're exhausted from displacement, exhausted from moving from place to place every day. Today, we were hoping to hear that maybe there will be a truce. Everyone is saying there might be a truce, and we're saying the same. But then, to wake up to the news that 50,000 soldiers are going to enter the Gaza Strip, that's truly catastrophic piece of news.
The Palestinian Civil Defense in Gaza warned Wednesday of Zionist attempts to overrun more so-called humanitarian areas in the Strip in order to forcibly displace residents toward what the occupation calls the safe humanitarian zone. The Civil Defense stressed that the occupation's policy aims to deepen the suffering of Gazans and block the delivery of humanitarian aid, forcing hundreds of thousands of displaced people to leave their shelters.
We warn of the grave humanitarian consequences facing civilians in residential areas that the Israeli occupation forces are once again invading, forcing residents to flee toward what it called a so-called humanitarian safe zone. We continue to receive distress calls around the clock from civilians trapped in these areas where the occupation army has advanced and now designates as unsafe military zones. We caution against the severe humanitarian fallout of this systematic Israeli policy, which aims to gradually confine displaced civilians into this so-called humanitarian zone in the middle of the Gaza Strip.
The United Nations stressed the need to enable workers to deliver aid on a wide scale in the Gaza Strip. UN spokesperson Stéphane Dujarric warned of deaths caused by Zionist-induced starvation, emphasizing that humanitarian workers must be able to deliver food consistently and widely through all crossings and available routes to reach Gaza's 2.1 million residents, half of whom are children. Izhari Prime Minister Bushraya Hamoudi Bayoun, representing President Ibrahim Ghali, has attended the 9th Tokyo International Conference on African Development, TICAD, in Yokohama, Japan, from August 20th to August 22nd. He joined the opening session alongside Japan's Prime Minister and African leaders, with discussions focusing on new programs for Africa-Japan cooperation and human resource development. He's accompanied by Foreign Minister Mohammed Salim Ould Salik Baysat and the Sahrawi AU representative Laman Abba Ali. And the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic's participation in the 9th TICAD session in Japan reaffirmed its role as a founding member of the African Union on the international stage, with Japanese authorities working to ensure The delegation's smooth and secure presence, avoiding a repeat of the controversy seen in the previous session. Mohammed Khatil has the report.
A delegation from the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic took part in the Tokyo International Conference on African Development, TICAD, led by the Sahrawi Prime Minister in his capacity as representative of Sahrawi President Brahim Ghali, along with the Minister of Foreign Affairs and African Affairs and the Ambassador and Permanent Representative to the African Union. This significant participation at this international economic and political forum constitutes a severe setback for the Makhzen's diplomacy and a resounding response to its maneuvers aimed at excluding and undermining the rights of the Sahrawi state as a founding member of the African Union. At the TICAD summit, both Japan and Africa adopted an ambitious vision to build a fair partnership between Africa and its international partners based on the principles of equality and mutual respect, far from any approach that imposes external agendas. To Morocco's great dismay, the Japanese authorities set up special and high protection for the Sahrawi delegation on this occasion to avoid that the 2024 summit scenario, when the Moroccan representative brutally assaulted his Sahrawi counterpart, occurs again. The participation of the Sahrawi delegation in the preparatory ministerial meeting for the 9th Tokyo International Conference on African Development, TICAD, was not limited to protocol, but had an important political and strategic dimension, as it represents a strategic opportunity to raise awareness and defend the Sahrawi cause, while consolidating the fact that no one represents Sahrawi people in the exercise of their inalienable right to self-determination and independence.
The Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic says its participation at the Tokyo International Conference on African Development is a major setback for Morocco, which failed to block its presence. Sahrawi Foreign Minister Mohammed Baysat added that Rabat also failed to remove references to African Union member states in the summit's final communique, while Japan provided close protection for the Sahrawi delegation and nameplate.
Morocco repeatedly attempted to delete a paragraph from the Yokohama Declaration on the partnership between Japan and the African Union member states, specifically seeking to remove the phrase member states, which appears several times. However, most participants stood against this maneuver, and the wording was preserved in the final statement. This development marks a major setback for Morocco and its schemes aimed at undermining the rights of the Sahrawi Republic as a founding member of the African Union. It also represents the failure of its attempts to block Western Sahara participation in the summit, as well as the rejection of the odd ideas it promotes about sidelining the Continental Union.
The Sahrawi Deputy Representative to Ethiopia in the African Union, Naail, said Western Sahara's presence at TICAD 9 proves once again that the Sahrawi Republic is a continental and international reality, and that the AU has refused to yield to Moroccan pressure to block its participation.
Morocco's occupation authorities tried by all means to obstruct this participation, but the clarity of the African Union's vision and its determination to uphold decisions on partnerships prevented that from happening. The continental body refuses to bow to dictates and rejects all attempts to exclude founding states and members from such meetings. This participation once again proves that the Sahrawi people is an irreversible continental and international reality rooted in historical truth and legal legitimacy. Morocco must come to terms with this reality and learn to engage with it.
And in another matter, the Sahrawi General Union of Workers stressed that social justice in Africa cannot be achieved without ending colonialism, including Morocco's occupation of Western Sahara, the continent's last colony. Speaking at the 46th session of the Organization of African Trade Union, Unity in Dar es Salaam Union, Secretary General Nafi Ahmed warned that Sahrawis face poverty, hunger, marginalization, and ongoing human rights violations against political prisoners in Moroccan jails.
Achieving the desired social justice in Africa requires the continent's complete liberation from all forms of colonialism and ending the Moroccan occupation of the last colony in Africa. The Sahrawi people live under harsh conditions of poverty campaigns, starvation, and systemic exclusion, in addition to Morocco's ongoing grave human rights violations, including against Sahrawi political prisoners in the Moroccan jails, serving illegitimate sentences. The suffering of the Sahrawis is becoming more complicated amid today's global challenges and rivalries, as they remain under Moroccan occupation, deprived of all rights and subjected to mass displacement and systemic impoverishment away from their homeland.
Algeria's Minister of Knowledge, Economy, Startups and Micro-Enterprises Nordin Wadah is representing President Abdelmajid Tebboune at the 2025 Tokyo International Conference on African Development (TICAD) in Yokohama. According to the ministry, Wadah will highlight innovation and entrepreneurship, holding meetings with Japan's startup ecosystem to boost cooperation and develop joint technological projects. Algeria reaffirmed its commitment to African-Japanese partnership and positioned itself as a hub for investment and innovation. And in Morocco, the Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions Movement, BDS, says the ship Maersk Denver, accused of carrying military cargo to the Zionist entity, is docking again in Tangier. The group condemned the authorities for turning the country's ports into transit points for the Zionist genocide in Gaza, accusing Rabat of direct complicity against the Palestinian people.
The return of the vessel Maersk Denver today to dock once again at Tangier Medport raises a pressing moral and legal question. How can Morocco's ports be allowed to serve as military transit points for the Zionist genocide machine? We consider the docking of the Maersk Denver not an isolated incident, but another link in the chain of complicity with war crimes and genocide for which the occupation is condemned before the International Court of Justice. This places the Moroccan authorities before a major historic responsibility.
And in Sudan, 7 civilians, including 2 children, were killed and 13 others injured after rapid support forces attacked the village Al-Ghobsan Al-Ma'marama in North Kordofan, the Sudanese Doctors Network said on Wednesday. The group reported widespread looting, the burning of several homes, and the destruction of the village's only health center during Tuesday's assault. The coordination of resistance committees in Al-Fashar condemned the RSF's targeting of community kitchens that provide meals for civilians trapped inside the city. Mohammed Al-Mustafa, a member of the Fashar resistance committees, told Al24 News that RSF forces are continuing their daily bombardment and targeting of shelters, hospitals, and all institutions that provide services to civilians in besieged Al-Fashar.
One of the main targets under the Rapid Support Forces control is that they are bombing shelter areas, displacement centers, and communal kitchens operating in the state. Their militias are also working on planting insecurity, making life extremely difficult. Despite this, people continue their efforts with a great sacrifice, and many have already died. In this regard, I call on the United Nations, the African Union, international organizations, and the European Union to play their role and uphold their moral and humanitarian responsibilities first and foremost, as well as their legal obligations. What the Rapid Support Forces are doing against civilians in North Darfur State, specifically in Al-Fashar, is cowardly and treacherous act.
The Darfur regional government said famine is spreading in camps and refugee settlements controlled by the RSF in the region. Darfur government spokesperson Abdel Jabbar Ibn Kuni told Al24 News that RSF forces are imposing a total blockade on most refugee camps in the state, preventing the entry of humanitarian aid.
There is a humanitarian famine in the displacement camps in Darfur region, but the famine is most severe in the camps inside Darfur itself. These camps have been taken over by the rapid support militias, who have prevented aid from reaching them. There is widespread famine in the displacement camps, and this famine is causing serious diseases among children, women, and the elderly.
للأطفال والنساء وكبار السن.
Now we move on to developments regarding the Russian-Ukrainian war. The Kremlin announced that Russian President Vladimir Putin held a phone call with his Turkish counterpart Recep Tayyip Erdogan, during which they discussed the latest developments in Ukraine. According to a Kremlin statement, President Putin briefed Erdogan on his assessment of the meeting held between Russian and U.S. officials in Alaska. The statement added that Putin praised Turkey's role in facilitating and hosting rounds of negotiations between the Russian and Ukrainian delegations in Istanbul. And Turkey confirmed its support for a peace process in Ukraine that includes all parties. The presidency said Wednesday following a phone call between President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Erdogan stressed he is closely following the process and backs efforts to achieve a lasting peace with full participation from all sides. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov stated that Moscow firmly rejects any attempt to discuss security guarantees to resolve the Ukrainian crisis without Russia's participation. Speaking to the press, Lavrov warned that seeking to create collective security guarantees for Ukraine while excluding Russia would be a road to nowhere.
We cannot agree to the proposal of resolving collective security issues without the Russian Federation. That will not work. We have made it repeatedly clear that Russia does not overestimate its interests, but we will firmly and resolutely ensure our legitimate interests. I am confident that those in the West, and above all in the United States, understand well that discussing security issues seriously without the Russian Federation is a utopian idea and a road to nowhere.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov also said Wednesday that the European Union will continue to support Ukraine's armed forces and push for new sanctions against Russia, denying that what the EU is doing can be described as diplomacy.
Kaja Kallas, by the way, who is considered the top diplomat of the European Union and the High Representative for all kinds of foreign affairs, said after the Washington meeting that the EU will not trust any agreements with the Russian Federation. Therefore, the EU will continue to support the Ukrainian armed forces and will promote new sanctions against Russia, regardless of any agreement it does not trust. Well, this is not diplomacy. This is in fact a deterioration of foreign policy methods, which effectively reduce the European Union to being solely about sanctions.
And in Syria, a significant drop in rainfall has led to a sharp decline in wheat production, the country's staple food, forcing many farmers to abandon the lands, threatening food security and the agricultural sector nationwide. Nabil Khazini has the report.
Across the farmlands of Al-Qamishli, Syrian farmer Abbas Uthman walks slowly through yellow, withered stalks. Nothing remains of the wheat but memories. This is how Abbas sums up the harsh reality faced by hundreds of farmers in northeastern Syria, where the worst drought in over 3 decades has turned seasons of hope into years of loss. Low rainfall and extreme climate change have devastated agriculture across the country.
This year, we planted 6 hectares and we harvested nothing. The crops didn't grow, and even the shepherds didn't benefit from the land. We sustained huge losses, including farm wages, seeds, and fertilizers. We lost all of these costs.
The harvest season ended in disappointment, as climate change and prolonged drought led to significantly reduced rainfall across much of the country. Without enough water, the crops failed, and farmers were left with little to show for their hard work. The losses in Al-Qamishli are not isolated. Nationwide, wheat production has dropped by 40%, a dangerous figure for a country that depends heavily on this staple crop.
الإنتاج المحلي لا يغطي أكثر من 2 إلى 3.
Local production does not cover more than 2 to 3% of local demand, especially after a year of drought that hit Syria. Never in Syria's history has there been a year like this one, and therefore it can't be relied upon, especially since the main food in Syria is bread.
This season, Syria was able to buy significantly less wheat from local farmers compared to last year, roughly half as much. Yet the country's demand remains high, creating a growing gap between what's needed and what's available.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's a wrap for tonight's program. Thanks for watching and have a great night.